Ever had a player too smug for their own good? The kind who think that dice love them, the kind who roll natural 20s like it's a divine right and then make the mistake of rubbing it in? Yeah, well, that's when the gods start taking notes and new character sheets are getting filled in. Hello all you wonderfully funky world builders, Funky Monkey here, and welcome to today's tale of fate, pride and poetic justice, where hubris meets its match and the gods keep score. This one comes with a side of cosmic balance, divine irony and moral lessons sharp enough to slice through mortal ego. So grab your dice, pour something proportionate and maybe whisper a quick prayer, because today we're talking about the goddess who never forgets. We are all here because we all love TTRPGs, be it Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Daggerheart, or whatever chaos your wizard's totally safe experiment just unleashed upon your world. And if you're looking to add the force of judgment that can humble kings and bless underdogs in the same breath, don't settle for just another nameless deity of justice. Go mythic, go Greek, go Nemesis, the inescapable justice of the gods. Because if there's one thing she teaches us, it's that the higher you climb, the further you fall, and we all know how much damage that causes. And someone's always keeping count, so always remember that. Now, before she became the quiet terror of every arrogant hero and the cosmic accountant of divine karma, Nemesis was born from the dark itself. Not metaphorically, the Greeks meant it literally. Her story starts before light had even been invented, deep in the shadowy folds of night, along doom, death, and fate themselves. So let's roll back the heavens and meet Nemesis, daughter of night, the goddess who keeps the universe honest. In Greek mythology, Nemesis personified righteous indignation and a delicate balance between fortune and fate. Her name derives from the Greek verb nemein, meaning to dispense what is due, or to allot, reflecting her role as a divine distributor of justice, the one who punished hubris, the arrogance that drives mortal to overstep their mortal bounds. Ancient authors offered differing accounts of her parentage. Some described her as the daughter of Nyx, night, a primordial goddess born from shadow. Others named Oceanus or even Zeus as her father, suggesting she moved between the old powers and the Olympian order. Unlike Ficaltike, fortune, Nemesis was not random nor blind. She was the guardian of proportion, ensuring that unearned success or excessive pride met its rightful corrections. The earliest account of Nemesis comes from Hesiod's Theogony. There she appears among the children of Nyx, born without a consort alongside Moros, doom, Ker, death spirit, and Thanatos, death. A lineage that places her among the primordial powers of fate and necessity. In Hesiod's vision of the cosmos, Nemesis is not a capricious deity, but one of the ancient forces that upholds the balance of the universe, ensuring that destiny, once measured, remains just. Now, because we are talking about Greek mythology, we can expect differing versions of myths. Later writers that come after Hesiod offer differing lineages for Nemesis. For example, Pausanias records that at Rhamnus, her devotees believed that she was a daughter of Oceanus, tying her to the encircling waters that mark the world's edge and symbolize natural boundaries. Others, on the other hand, following the lost epic Cypria, named her as a daughter of Zeus. In that particular account, Nemesis fled her father's pursuit by transforming through many shapes, fish, beast and bird, until Zeus, taking the form of a swan, finally caught up with her. From their unconsensual union, to be very clear, came an egg, discovered by a shepherd who brought it to Leda, an egg from which later hatched Helena of Troy, but I'm getting ahead of myself. These very traditions reveal Nemesis's fluidity and transformation, her ability to elude even divine pursuit. Whether born of Oceanus or Zeus or Nyx, she remains a power both elusive and inevitable. The embodiment of balance that no force, mortal nor immortal, can truly escape. As I just spoiled the surprise, in the epic Cypria, Nemesis is also linked to the birth of Helen of Troy. According to Apollodorus, some authors said that Nemesis fled Zeus by transforming into a goose, while Zeus, taking the form of a swan, pursued and coupled with her. Now, every single time I think there is nothing that can surprise me any longer in Greek mythology, Zeus comes along and says, "Here, hold my ambrosia." Anyway, from their union, Nemesis laid an egg, which a shepherd discovered and brought to Queen Leda. Leda kept it hidden in a chest until one day it hatched, revealing Helen, whom she raised as her own daughter. Thus, Helen of Troy, whose beauty would one day ignite the Trojan War, may have been fathered by Zeus and born of Nemesis, beauty born from divine pursuit and reluctant justice. This myth reveals the irony at the heart of Nemesis's nature. Even the goddess of retribution and balance cannot escape the designs of fate. Her unwilling motherhood of Helen shows how justice and chaos are intertwined, and how even divine acts of resistance can birth the seed of catastrophe. Helen's lineage adds a deeper irony to the epic's cause of strife. The most devastating war in legend may have sprung from the womb of retribution itself. Pausanias records that Pheidias' statue of Nemesis at Rhamnus depicts Helen being led to the goddess by Leda, reinforcing this mythic bond between justice, desire, and destiny. Now, as any goddess, she had symbols, she had a portfolio. Nemesis embodied righteous indignation against undeserved fortune and serves as the divine counterbalance to Hubris. She was sometimes identified with Adrasteia, the Inescapable, or Rhamnusia, a title drawn from her great shrine at Rhamnus. You heard me mention it a few times already. Unlike Tyche, Fortune, whose gifts were blind and unpredictable, Nemesis saw clearly. She ensured that success and suffering remained in proportion, preserving the equilibrium that keeps both mortals and gods within their rightful bonds. As the goddess of proportion and the avenger of crime, she is often depicted wielding a measuring rod, a telestick, a bridle, scales, and a sword. And she rides in a chariot drawn by griffins. Now, I also mentioned the statue at Rhamnus. The first account of Nemesis's imagery comes from Pausanias, who described her sanctuary at Rhamnus, where Athenians believed she punished the arrogance of foreigners. So, the story goes that the Persians had once brought a block of Persian marble to Marathon, intending to fashion a trophy to celebrate their victory. When they were defeated, the sculptor Pheidias used that very marble to carve Nemesis instead, the goddess of justice born from an act of pride. Pausanias writes that she wore a crown adorned with both deer and tiny figures of Nike, victory, symbols of vigilance and restraint in triumph. In one hand she held an apple branch, and in the other a cup engraved with the imagery of Ethiopians. The statue's base depicted Helen being led to Nemesis by Leda, reflecting the belief that the goddess was Helen's true mother. Originally without wings, later depictions gave her wings of swift justice, capturing the speed at which balance returns. Pausanias notes that Nemesis's wrath was provoked by the Persians' hubris in bringing marble meant for their own glory, a tangible instance of arrogance punished. Rhamnus became her principal cult center, and there she was worshipped as Rhamnusia, the local guardian of divine proportions and fate. Of course, because these are the Greeks we are talking about, there are many myths floating around Nemesis. Nemesis appears most vividly when excessive pride demands correction. In Hesiod's Works and Days, the poet warns of an age when Nemesis and shame, Aidos, will abandon the world. And I quote, "Then Aidos and Nemesis will depart the broad path earth among the immortals, leaving men to suffer endless woes." In essence, in Hesiod's vision, without her presence, humanity sinks into greed and lawlessness. Nemesis is therefore essential, the force that restrains arrogance and keeps civilization from devouring itself. In Callimachus's Hymn to Demeter, the proud Thessalian king Erysichthon dares to cut down the goddess's sacred oak. Nemesis, ever watchful, looking out for pride and hubris, recorded his blasphemous words and carried them to Demeter, who punished the king with insatiable hunger. Nothing could satisfy him. Not food, not flesh, not even his own body, which he consumes in despair. Here, Nemesis is the scribe of divine justice, observing hubris and ensuring its retribution. Another interesting myth comes from Ovid's Metamorphoses. Here, Nemesis hears the pleas of those wronged by Narcissus. Narcissus is the original story from which narcissists get their name. Anyway, Narcissus scorns every heart that ever loved him. Thus, Nemesis condemns him to fall hopelessly in love with his own reflection, forcing his vanity to become his undoing. Together, the fates of Erysichthon and Narcissus reveal Nemesis's unique form of punishment, poetic and precise justice. The one who mocks hunger is consumed by it, the one who spurns love becomes enslaved by his own image. Nemesis does not destroy, she mirrors. Through irony, she restores the mortal balance that pride seeks to break. And there is one more myth that is rather fucked up. This comes from Nonnus, and it is called Dionysiaca. And in this story, there was once a nymph called Aura, swift of foot and proud of her untouched freedom. She served Artemis, the virgin huntress. Yet, this nymph dared mock her mistress, claiming that no goddess so radiant, so beautiful, and so curvaceous in forms could truly be chaste. So, basically, she called Artemis a liar. Boasting of her own lean and boyish grace, Aura's pride crossed the line between innocence and insolence. Enraged, Artemis sought out Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, and demanded justice. Nemesis listened, calm and inexorable, and decreed that Aura would lose the very purity she had made her crown. But in a fucked up way. Calling upon Eros, she sets in motion the web of divine consequences. Eros strikes Dionysus with one of his love arrows, making Dionysus pursue the nymph. And although Aura defied him and rejected him, the will of Nemesis prevailed, and it ended with her being essayed by him. Thus was the huntress hunted and pride answered by fate. For in the realm of gods, no boast goes unbalanced and no virtue remains untested. And although this is a more fucked up epic, a more grim and sinister and disturbing outcome, it shows that not even divine or semi-divine creatures escape Nemesis. They cannot escape balance. Now, there are different other stories that show basically her portfolio. The Orphic hymn to Nemesis portrays her as an all-seeing force of cosmic justice. And I quote, "Heavenly and illustrious Nemesis, daughter of justice, you see all the work of men, rejoice in just deeds, and send energy into the souls of the righteous." In this case, she averts the design of the wicked, humbles the proud, and restores the world to harmony. Worshippers invoke her not for vengeance alone, but for moderation and fair judgment, calling her queen and pleading something along the lines of bring a fair mind and measure. In her, justice becomes balance, a living law that governs both gods and mortals. Likewise, Mesomedes praises her as the one who weighs the span of every life. And I quote, "Thine is the life of mankind, to weigh out to each his share of good and ill, to set the limits to mortal life." These words reveal Nemesis not as a blind punisher, but as a meticulous arbiter, assigning to each their rightful portion. Her task is not destruction, but equilibrium, ensuring that every fortune, joy and sorrow is measured in just proportions. She was also a champion against hubris, and we see this in Plato and Aeschylus's works. In Plato's Laws, the philosopher invokes Nemesis as the divine guardian of mortal order. He warns that those who dishonor their parents, for example, will not escape her sight. And I quote, "Nemesis never lets a crime of this magnitude go unpunished." Here Nemesis becomes more than myth. She is ethical gravity, the unseen force that anchors respect, restraint, and familial duty. For Plato, she is not merely divine vengeance, but the moral conscience of the cosmos. In Aeschylus's Prometheus Pound, her presence is felt even when her name is unspoken. The chorus in his works caution that the powers who act with arrogance invite Nemesis's punishment, and Prometheus himself recognized that defiance of Zeus leads inevitably to suffering. He knows that by stealing fire from Zeus and giving it to mortals, he's inviting divine balance. He's inviting Nemesis. Though the god never steps on stage in this play, her concept, the justice that humbles pride, shapes the tragedy's heart. Aeschylus turns Nemesis into an idea, the inescapable law that follows all who rise too high. Now let's circle back a little bit to Rhamnus, the sanctuary of Nemesis. I mentioned earlier that her statue was carved out of marble brought by Persians to celebrate their victory, a victory that never actually comes. She holds an apple and a cup. The branch likely represents the fruit of judgment, while the cup symbolizes measured retribution, perhaps. But the cult of Rhamnus emphasizes Nemesis as a protector against foreign arrogance. Athenians credit their triumph at Marathon in part to her wrath upon the overconfident Persians, honoring her as the divine defender who punished excessive pride with poetic precision. So, as you can see, the Greeks were kinda cheeky in this case. They attributed their victory in part not necessarily to their skill or courage or abilities in combat. No, they attributed to overconfidence on the part of Persians. This is more like even the gods think that you were too arrogant, so of course we won. At least that's how I see it. So this is what her sanctuary at Rhamnus symbolizes for the ancient Greeks. We also get more information about Nemesis through her festivals and worship. Though Nemesis never enjoyed the widespread devotion of, let's say, Zeus or Athena, she was honored in local observances. In Attica, during the month of Hekatombaion, July-August more or less, devotees celebrated the Nemesia, a festival held at Rhamnus in her name. Worshippers offered honey cakes and perhaps apples to ask the goddess for measured fortune and protection from mischance. It's basically like you or I asking the universe or the gods or whoever you want to ask for winning the lottery, but not the jackpot, just a mid-sized winning, just to make sure you're not inviting ill fate on the other hand. So there's no balance that needs to be achieved. It's very interesting actually. And these simple offerings of apples and honey cakes reflect her role as the arbiter of balance rather than excess. We'll talk about, for example, the festival of Dionysus, which was characterized by excess, as opposed to what Nemesis wants. Balance rather than excess. In Roman times, because Nemesis survived into Roman times and the Romans adopted her, Nemesis' image merged with that of Fortuna and the goddess of vengeance. Gladiators and charioteers invoked her before contests, seeking not victory, but fair judgment. On Roman mosaics, she often appears with her signature wheel and measuring rod, symbols of impartial fate and the eternal cycles of gain and loss. Of course, there are variants and lesser known traditions. Some ancient writers identified Nemesis with Rhea or Cybele, linking her to a 30-year lunar solar cycle, a symbol of natural renewal and cosmic rhythm. Others equate her with Aphrodite, emphasizing her role as a dispenser of retribution in matters of love. Yet despite these associations, her essential nature remained unchanged. Nemesis was still the punisher of arrogance and the guardian of balance against excess. Of course, we get to see Nemesis evolve through time and reach Christianity and even later transformations. With the rise of Christianity, Nemesis was often recast as a spirit of vengeance or an allegory for divine justice, her balance reframed as punishment. But during the Renaissance, scholars rediscovered her through Pausanias and the ancient hymns, restoring her dignity as a symbol of moral proportions, not just punishment. Her legacy endures even nowadays in different languages. To call someone a Nemesis is to name them as fate's inevitable opponent, the echo of a goddess who once weighed the fortunes of gods and men alike. Now, how can you use her in world building? In my opinion, Nemesis offers deep inspiration for tabletop campaigns and fantasy narratives. She's not simply a goddess to worship or fear, but a force that can shape entire worlds. Her justice is subtle, poetic, and always in motion. Imagine a campaign setting where Nemesis may personify cosmic equilibrium. When the balance between good and evil, law and chaos, wealth and poverty, or even life and death falters. In that case, she sends visions, omens, or even emissaries to correct it, or to warn those who cause the fracture to just knock it off. Or your characters, your players, can find a shrine like Ramnus standing guard at a remote border fortress. Pilgrims, soldiers, and rulers come seeking her favor before battle, praying for humility and restraint, but victory, fair and just victory. A story might center on retrieving a stolen idol or facing her wrath when a premature monument to victory is raised before the war is won. Again, she was the punisher of hubris. She rarely strikes openly, instead her justice takes the form of poetic misfortune, an arrogant tyrant transformed into a beast they hunted, a vain hero undone by their own reflection. Her signs are subtle, but her lessons are merciless. Or you can let yourself be inspired by Callimachus. Nemesis might maintain a celestial ledger of mortal offenses. Adventurers could discover their own names inscribed within and must perform acts of humility or sacrifice or great courage or something to erase them, or risk the goddess's quiet reprisal. On the other hand, because Nemesis sees all deeds, she might barter in forbidden knowledge. A desperate hero could petition her for a rival's weakness just to keep the balance. But the price is steep: pride, memory, or something far more personal. For storytellers and world builders, as you can see, Nemesis remains a timeless archetype, the embodiment of inevitable justice and the restoration of balance. She reminds us that in every world, mythic, mortal, or imagined, hubris invites consequences, and the wheels of fate always turn. And with that, our journey through righteous wrath, divine balance, and one goddess who keeps the universe from tipping over comes to an end. If this dive into hubris, fate and poetic justice sparked an idea or made you suddenly nervous about that last natural 20 you rolled, or 5 in a row, hit that subscribe button, drop a like and ring that bell like you're trying to call down Zeus himself. Just maybe not while he's in the mood, if you know what I mean. Now, got a favorite myth, goddess, or beautiful tragic hero you'd like me to cover next? Drop in the comments below or just come say hi. I love hearing which legends inspire you and what you're bringing into your world. Thank you, truly, for the gift of your time and imagination. Until next time, stay curious, stay funky, and never stop world building. And remember, every legend has its balance, every victory its cost, and somewhere in the shadows, Nemesis is still keeping score. Have yourselves a balanced, fate-approved, funky day. Cheers.